Happy Saturday evening, everyone. Sam here from Reloved Guitars, and what do? I set up guitars using my special fret leveling technique where I level the frets with the guitar fully strung in the playing configuration, and that's for maximum accuracy and minimum fret metal loss. That's the idea of it. I also upgrade guitars and make guitars and do lots of guitar related improvement-y things, but here we are tonight with Stuart's Fender Stratocaster USA, and this is in for a full setup. He's had it a little while now. We did a bit of nut adjustment and setup without leveling the frets previously, but I think he's got some fret slap that needs taken care of, so we're going to do that today. And while we're at it, we're going to replace this one with a, where's it gone, with a Seymour Duncan JB Jr, which is a nice pickup for that bridge position in my experience anyway. And I'm thinking of replacing this original nut, which is bone and very very powdery. I'm going to replace that with a Tusq nut. Now I've got a couple of different varieties here. They're all for Strats, but I've got a few alternatives because I wasn't quite sure whether this is curved or flat. It's probably going to turn out to be flat. Probably could only, I don't know how many of these have curved or whether they're all flat. I don't know. Anyhow, I think we're also going to put on some Tusq string trees to give this the best chance at staying nice and in tune all the time. And here we've got a nice Tremolo Wilkinson with a drop-in arm, which is very nice. And brass saddles bought from Northwest Guitars, if I recall correctly. Anyway, so this is in some ways this is a straightforward, you might say, setup. I'm going to just zoom out a little bit while I do this bit. What I want to do is I need to sort of plan the sequence of this, because I want to take off the back. Because what do I want to take it off for? Because I want to tighten the claw and lock the tremolo down while I do the rest of the setup work. So we'll start with this off, and then I think we'll move on to, get my mic somewhere where you can hear me. We'll move on to doing the nut, and the removal of the nut looks a pretty scary process because I have to cut it off. I think my experience is I think the Tusq nut is worth having. It gives, along with the full stretch out of your strings, it gives you the best chance you've got of having good solid tuning ability. Okay, so let's find the business. So we're going to send these right in. And we'll pull the strings flat. Now Stuart's given me a set of hybrid slinkies, 8 to 46, sorry, 9 to 46s, as opposed to 10s. So I'm thinking that's probably what we had on there before. Okay, we're flat on the deck there. That's a good start point for setup work. Now, if we come down this end to see what's going on here, I'm going to try and zoom you in a bit. So here we are in the land of nut. Now, to do this, I'm going to need to get me a mirror up close, because with this I have to be able to see the other side of the thing. Now, somebody made a comment on my channel the other day on YouTube saying when you do cut a nut like that, you really need something to clamp your guitar in to stop it moving. I kind of feel that's not too bad, but in some ways, yes, from another angle, it would be great to have great to have a clamp of some kind. But you know, this is a good old time served thingy, rest, and it's done its work. So what I'll do is, while we're doing this, I will also get ready to replace the string trees. And these, the Fender ones, put 2 holes into the whole game, which is a little bit annoying. Do I understand why? Not really. They kind of commit them or prevent them from any extra rotation, which is a bit on the annoying side. Now these, wow, got a bit of wear on these already, Stuart. I'm impressed. Yeah, so I'm just wondering. And I need the strings on whichever way, but the problem with this is that they're going to come off now. But I'll just have to release them. I did cut them with a bit of extra string so that we had a chance to poke them through one more time and tighten them up. So that will be saving grace for me to put them back through when the time comes to test out the new nut. So we'll just dangle them off for the time being down there. So I'm going to replace these. Let's remove the Fender thingies. Now the Fender ones come out, you can see they've got a locator hole and a fixing hole. And obviously for the Tusq string trees we don't need the locator, but we do need the screw hole. So if I just cut these out, I think I should have some shares in good old Graph Tech, you know. Got so many of their bits hanging up on my wall still. Okay, so the thing just to notice on this is the size of the screws that are going to go in here are quite a bit different than the ones that have come out. So I think we need to sort of widen the holes if necessary, and I think it is necessary. What we don't want to risk is having any thingy-majig split of the wood. So we definitely don't want that. So always expand your pilot holes. 250 for the actual screw on this one, whereas the screw on this one here is its full widest 280. 280. Yeah, about 280. So we want a sort of 250 to make the hole, to create the extra space near the top more than anything else. So there's a 236. It's a little bit blunt, so we're going to have to hope it works. So I'm just going to go a little bit in at the top there. These are also longer, so I'm going to also drill down a little bit now to what I want to do on this, very important, even when you're pretty confident you can just drill away and everything's going to be fine, I always recommend you pick a spot that is the lowest you want it to go and give yourself a guide that you will not go beyond, and that way you can get yourself the depth you need, but without any risk of going too far. Okay, so that should have widened these up somewhat. Really, they're probably going to take both the same size, but I'll use the shorter one at the back here, and the longer one near the front, where the strings rise up a little bit more. Okay, so there's our two thingies. Right, so that's that bit done. Let's put the drill out of the way. So the nut removal, now these are always beautifully tightly fitted, so I don't really think there's going to be any chance of just pulling this out. What we do need to do to begin with is to give it a little You won't be able to see the same unless I zoom out. Sorry about this. I'm going to do a tiny bit of scoring, man. I just want to score along the edge of the nut. Well, that one popped straight through into a little space below the nut, which is interesting. I just wonder whether that means the nut's looser than I think it is, which could be quite nice. I mean, it would be very nice to save me doing the sawing game, but we will do the sawing game if and when necessary. That's this side done, and we chug it over the other side. So this is, I'm just holding it with my hand. You could lean it up on something if you wished to do so. And again, I can feel this going, slipping straight into the little groove under the nut. Now, these are obviously quite hard to hold, these things, so you have to kind of get comfortable with it. The idea at this point, you're not really trying to cut the nut out, you're really just trying to break or score the very, very fine, thin, what's that thing I'm thinking of? Finish, lacquer, poly. Now, because when you do that, because what you don't want to have happen is for the whole lot to come out, or more finish to come out. Now, what I'm just going to have a look and see is whether this thing has any inclination to move of its own free will without me. Actually, that does. That's not bad. That's quite nice. Good. Not always the case. This saves me grinding it away. Beautifully fitted, that's for sure. And it's a curved one. Okay. Don't quite know what that is, whether it's a new bone type of thing or whether it's Graphtec, but we're replacing some slots that I've cut in the past to get to the right first fret action with a nut that doesn't have cut slots. In other words, they're cut by machine in the factory, not by human hands, clumsy human hands, or rather scrappy files, no matter how good they are. So I'm just looking at this. This is a 9.5, judging by the position of the bottoms of the nut slots. That's good. 9.5, which is what we've got here. And we've got a, what do you call it? Now this one is an adjustable one, but, not adjustable, sorry, it's a 9.5 curved one. However, if I take it out of its department of its packaging, it's very thin, and obviously we don't really want to stand it on its little foot because it'll wobble. So we'd have to file the little foot off it to get it into working as a what's the word I'm looking for? Working as a curved nut, like the one we just took off. My only concern is to just make sure these stand high enough, because they are quite low, these. So I'm going to just do a check, because if this is too low to use in this slot, then there's no point us using it. 3.6 gap between the low part of the bass slot and this is 3.9, so this is actually going to be too low if we use this. That is quite interesting, isn't it? A replacement nut for Fenders as listed on the site, and it is too low unless we boosted it. It's fine if you're going to use it in a flat slot, you'd use the little foot bit. Now that's not the end of the world, because I have got one from earlier on that I didn't use. It's a 9.5 Tusq nut for Strat. Now this one, let's have a look. We got, what did we say we needed? 3.7, and we needed 3.7. Now that's fine, except, I'll have to put this one aside now, except that by the time we've put a radius on that, that will still be too small. So the only one we can really use is this one, which means I've now opened a few. And to make this one work, I'd have to cut the radius into it. Now, it's probably a simpler way of doing it is to borrow the existing nut. Now remember that the challenging bit about this is that what I don't want to end up doing is, what do I want to do? I need to keep the curve on the bottom, but I need to get it to the exact height because I don't want to cut into the slots, did I say? I don't want to cut into the nut slots, or the knot slots. So this is a bit of a pain. So that one is no good. That one I can't use because this one is too low unless I boost it with, I could boost it with some foil. That's one way I've used to boost these up in the past, or some flexible plastic that will just sit on there. What I don't want to do, I really don't want to have to, hang on, let me think about this. If I'm making this sit, I'm going through jumping through all manner of hoops to make this sit. The simplest thing for me to do with this is to make it an adjustable nut, and then it will be pullable, uppable to the correct height. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. If they don't make one that matches exactly, which is quite odd, but that's the way it is, I'm going to just ignore me for a second. I'm just going to go over there. Just going to reduce this little thing here, just slightly take it down. So I've taken the little foot away and tidy it up in a second. And what we've got, this is the best, I think this is the best spacing match anyway. Okay, so that's good. We've got rid of the little foot. Do a little bit of scraping just to even it out, level it out. Okey-doke. Like I say, if we used this now as is, then it would be, it wouldn't work because it would be a fraction too short, and I'd have to boost it with, you know, keep on adding little layers of foil, which is pretty good. It works pretty well, and it gives you a lot of control over how high you lift it up. But the problem with it is that it'll leave a little bit showing. An adjustable nut that I'm going to put in here will ultimately leave us with, it's on the floor, it'll leave us with a small gap either side, but that's obvious, it'll do that because it's adjustable. So the first thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to carefully thin it down if I can, just enough to get it to fit in this nut slot comfortably. So it's still a tiny fraction too big. We want it to be just loose enough to go in, but tight enough not to wobble too much. So it's a little bit touch and go. You can see it's sort of starting to want to go in, but again, a little bit tight. Trying to keep it so it stays flat. It has a tendency to roll away from the slotted side of it, and you can end up messing up the thickness and it not fitting. It's starting to get there. What I'll do is once I've got this thickness correct, I will put the nut in and see how it seats, and if perchance it seated perfectly as a solid nut, we could use it, but I don't really think that's necessarily going to be the case. Well, we never know. Let's have a look. It's a nice fit. Let's get a sort of sense of it. Maybe. You never know. it could be, it would be extraordinarily lucky if it did. So let's give it a sort of quick try. I don't know how well you can see this. So, what am I thinking of here? I had a bit sticking through. Oh, no, that's sticking through the wrong way. Maybe Stuart's changed the strings since I did it. Ooh, you know what? We could be in luck. This would be magical if it was. I mean, it would be odd if the Fender nut wasn't good for a straight, or the Tusq nut for Fender wasn't good for a straight up replacement. I mean, it ought to be, shouldn't it? Maybe my micrometer was just a little bit iffy. Anyway, let's hope that it does, because that will save the time and effort of making it adjustable. What I really want, and the reason I care so much about having the nut being adjustable and going to the lengths with nuts as I do, is because the importance of getting the nut right is just so critical to playability and tuning stability. So it's do you know what, we might almost be on the mark there. Yeah, so it's absolutely worth going to great lengths for. And I often say, if people haven't got a budget for work, I don't do a sort of £40 setup, inverted commas, that doesn't work on the frets, but because I don't think it's worth it to just oil fingerboards and change strings and hope you get a better playing action. But what I sometimes will do for 40 quid and not a full setup, if I'm going to do anything at all, it will be to do the nut. If that's all somebody can afford to do, that's what I'll do, because the improvement of the nut is the best, the biggest bang for your buck, buck for your bang, you know what I mean. It's the best improvement you can make for the investment. I have to say that is absolutely where I want it. Thank you. Take it all back, Tusq, you beautiful people. So I've got all these now spares over there. Good. Well, look, that's kind of moves me pretty much straight on to the next thing, which is to get the frets ready for leveling. Now, before I do that, I'm going to have a look at where we are with the frets in terms of height and in terms of the relief in the neck. So let's just tune up. Okay, so having put the action down from fully floating, which it was, and which we'll put it back to, this will have lowered the playing action somewhat. And we currently got it on 1.5, a little low there, so I'm just going to bring this up. Now I think these saddles are probably, thank you, UK, yeah, they're UK grub screws because they're replacement saddles. So I'm going to bring these up a little bit. Normally what you would find is setting the tremolo to decked will drop the action by half a millimeter, which it has done, which means it was a little bit higher before. And I think that's Stuart probably trying to get rid of the fret slap that we both looked or listened to when he brought it over. So I think what we're going to find is this is now should be about the sort of target action. Look across here. 3, perhaps a bit flat, a bit low, a bit further up. Okay, now this has the action set where I would like it. Yes, I'm hearing fret, a little bit of fret slap. Yep. Okay, so the object of this leveling operation will be to remove that fret slap, and thankfully the banana truss rod method, as many of you will know from having watched these before, is beautifully designed, or accidentally does that for us. I'm going to check the relief in a minute, by the way, which I haven't done, so I'm just taking the opportunity to mark these up. So the reason I use this method is it's the only method I've found that allows me to not only level frets, but there are a number of advantages. It lets me level frets, first of all. It lets me level frets with the neck under compression, as it is when it's loaded in playing configuration. There isn't another method that does that. Even, I think, the Plec system and jigs that you can buy from places like Stuart and all those fancy places, they bend the neck, but they don't put it under compression. So this levels with the neck under compression, which I've definitely found changes the way the neck bunches and the way that frets sit up or don't. So there's definitely a difference in the neck when it's under compression longitudinally this way than when it's just curved or bent with some pistons or whatever people do. So leveling it under compression is good. The beauty of the method I use, even though people at Stuart have now brought out understring leveling beams, but in my experience they probably don't do what this method does. And because they bend and they're flexible, and you bend them onto, effectively you put them under pressure and you bend them onto the fretboard. This one, because the beam, or the banana as I call it, is stiffer, then it holds its shape, and the idea is it, if you like, imposes its smooth curve onto the slightly bunched up neck, and that's what really clears up the fret slap, as I call it. Okay, this has got about 0.3 of a mil's worth of relief. It's not extra big. It's just about in the right range. We could flatten it out possibly a tiny bit. I wonder if I wonder, but it should. Where's it gone? My USA Strat type hex key should happily adjust that. Put a tiny little bit of a turn on it. Let's have a quick look again. So I'm going to now, yeah, that's right. I'm going to now level, or set up ready to level with this, what I jokingly call the banana file, but it's come to be known as that because it's easier than saying tunable, adjustable, truss rod based fret leveling implement. People kind of know what I mean when I say the banana. And there's a little sting in the tail jokey aspect of why it's called that, which some of you already know about, but it's too long to explain here. It has to do with a very rude guitar tool inventor who had a tool very similar to this that cost 150 bucks that I bought, but that he made it impossible for me to use, so I had to improvise my own, and oh my goodness, I found I could do it for $0.00. So fabulous. Anyway, so what I've got here is I've got the banana cutting the frets, and judging by everything cutting, we've got a little low patch here. So everything's cutting all the way along here. We've got a cluster of 3 frets which are low here. Now, at a nice low playing action as this is, I would predict that would probably cause me some choke outs if I bent on the 14th, well, we can't call these the space between the 13th and 14th and the 14th and 15th. So let's have a listen to the individual notes. So I'm aiming to clear up any chokes, reduce the slap, as I call it, that little zizzy noise, like this. It's on every fret. I'm aiming to reduce that. So I'm checking first of all individual notes. Now I wouldn't be surprised if when I get here it's going to start sounding a little bit mushier. Okay, maybe a bit there. So that's okay. Now the next thing I might find is when I bend, chokes out. That's because I'm bending from a valley up the hill. So on this action, see this little crop of low frets here, particularly these 3, but maybe a couple more here, they're all in a dip, and as a result they're lower down. I'm bending uphill, but they still have to come back down to the low anchor point here, which means they get choked up on the B and the G. So the next thing I have to do is I'll shift now to the B track, as I call it, and I'll do the B track as well, and I'll see what the truss rod tells me, or the banana tells me, about the condition of the B track. Now if you remember, I'm also hoping to remove the fret wear on the lower frets at the same time, so I tend not to go after that. I tend not to think that that's worth direct straight up exchange of fret metal, because the fret wear on the lower frets at this stage in the guitar's life is only cosmetic. Now it doesn't mean it might not, it doesn't mean it doesn't bug you, because I'm sure it does, but it is cosmetic. Now what I'm finding is I've got low frets here, but I've got some high frets here, and they're shedding quite a bit of dust. These are barely being touched at all, but when we clear these down, then we should be able to bend from that ditch here, the low frets, and bend them without choking. So having done a bit of leveling on the B track, I'm going to check individual notes. I'm still expecting the E strings, the E bends in this little dip to choke out. So see, you can tell it's a dip because it doesn't choke out there. A little bit, but it keeps going. Here, chokes out, chokes out, chokes out, chokes out, chokes out, starts playing, starts playing. So we've got a dip right here, and that's what this fantastic tool tells me. Now I know what's happening with this neck, and you could look at it with the naked eye and you wouldn't see that dip. That's the incredible thing about the banana tool. And when you've been using it a long time, you get to read what it's telling you. It's not like superstition, like tea leaves or something at the bottom of a cup, but it's or the, what do they call them? The runes, the giblets. But you get to pretty much quickly learn what it's telling you about the condition and shape of the fretboard. So now I'm moving into the G track. Now the G track is in a way the all-important one, because this is the one that, thanks to the low, it's not its fault particularly, it's not the G's fault, if you like. It's a combination of the low patch here that making the G get in the way, but it's not really the G's. Maybe the G is a little bit uneven here, and we need it as level as we can get it to help things along the way. But the problem is down here on the treble side, and that's the low strings down there. So to begin with the G, again I'm going to put the truss rod in there, the banana, let's call it the banana, and I'm going to let it go up and down in pretty much mostly gravity. So I don't want to bend it too much, I don't want to flatten it out by pressurizing it, I just want to let it go on mostly gravity. And I know how much the 400 grit paper does or doesn't cut, and I know how far I can go before I feel like I've taken too much. Now these frets that were low here are now starting to cut. So it's low, there's a flare or a dip on this edge of the fingerboard. So what we will start to find is, first of all, we'll check the G strings on their own. Now we check the, ooh, bit better, choking out. So now what we can do, where it chokes, we can mark with our plectrum, hold it just over the spot where it chokes. It's choking out on the G there. Now the problem is, it's mostly choking, and we can level the G a little bit more, the G track. But the real problem is that is the fact we're in a ditch here, and we're starting from down in a hole, and the string's coming upwards, coming up to the top of the hill, across onto the G, and that G is playing off the note it's pressing on. But as it comes back down here to this low point, it's coming down, pointing downwards, and because it's starting from a low point in this top of this fret here is also in a ditch. Even the G part of it's in a ditch. The whole fret's in a bit of a ditch, but not so much the G, but it's still in a bit of a ditch. And so that the geometry of the string coming back down the hill in a straight line to this point means that these frets are in the way. We can try and level them a fair bit and get them out of the way, but we may have to concentrate a little bit more on the high E to level this bit out first. So now I'm hearing a tiny bit of string slap, or zzz I might call it. So I'm going to go back here on the G, and I'm going to put this back on here. I'm going to once again kind of trust to mostly gravity. As I say, if I get to where I want to go in terms of playability, and I find there's still a little bit of groove, string wear groove at the far end down here, I may leave it. It may not be important enough to exchange fret metal in order to just clear up what's effectively a cosmetic thing. Now you can see that where there's cutting going on right here and right here. So let's see if we've got the notes. Not bad. Starting to free up. Choking there. So we got choking out the top bit here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in the G track, back track, do it again, and this time I'm going to, I call it, just focus my energies a little bit more on this end, and you can see that I go from side to side, so I'm sort of following the natural radius of the fret as I level. So I'm not staying in any one spot. I'm not sort of grinding a flat spot into anything. I'm just moving it as I can as I go. Now what I'm aiming to do is to free up, I want to get as close as I can to freeing up these bends here. Doesn't want to do it. So that's to do with this little dip here. Now let's just double check the playing action. So if it's choking out on the, it's actually a tiny fraction low, but if it's choking out on the G, then unless you can iron out the causes of this choking out, then you have no alternative really but to raise the action very slightly. That's about right. It was running at about 1 millimeter, so I had it a bit low, which is okay. I'm kind of, doesn't hurt to start that low, but as long as you kind of recognize it, and there's no benefit from chasing it when it's really too low. There are very small differences but they're enough to prevent it from playing cleanly. So it's important to keep checking as you go. You know, be realistic. If you've set too low an action to begin with, then capitulate. Don't keep chasing, you know, a 1mm last fret action if you can't do it. Which on a 9.5 radius you tend not to be able to. It's as simple as that. I can do with ultra bright lights here. So I'm probably a fraction low on these as well. So let's just tweak those up a tiny bit. Somebody's beeped me. Now on this guitar I've not only got to do this business, but I've also got to take all the scratch plate off and get a new pickup wired in. Okay. So I don't really think it's going to help us doing any more leveling on the E track, because by the time the E string is across here, it's out of the E track. It's the G track that's going to make any further difference here. So I'm going to do one more bit of leveling in the G track, and for good measure I turn the banana around and just focusing on this last section from the 12th fret up. Now you can see that I'm still doing the other bits, but I'm just kind of concentrating my effort, if you like, on the last bit. Now you might say, how come this has come out of a Fender? That's okay. How come this has come out of a Fender factory and it needs this amount of work? And it's because we're setting a very low action. All right, a lot of people don't want a very low action, and so they are happy with what the condition of the frets as they come out of a factory. I'm not judging that. I'm not saying anyone's good or bad. I tell you that when I started playing guitars, had no choice, and we just lived with the absolutely awful playing actions. Now, by the way, just before we do this is the really good bit. Let's just listen to the fret slap. Not too much. It's that zzz, zzz, zzz on each note. Not so much, but more. A little more on the last two frets. It's improved a little bit since I've raised it a fraction higher, but so it's we've got to do it now. We've got to just clean that up now with the banana, and the way I found that really works is to lightly use the rod, keeping basically only pressing it in its center point, maybe just holding it onto the fret so it touches them, or so it's a little bit of weight at either end. But really what we're looking for is, as much as possible, to have the shape of this truss rod and its sandpaper, the smooth curve of this rod, we want it mapping itself into the bumpy, less than perfect curve of the frets, or the fret tops I should say. So we want to, what we're looking for now is to hear the notes clean up. Perfect. Now move on. So this is all it will take, and it's the way I do it is by thinking between two separate modes, if you like. Sometimes, to make the point of the two separate modes, I switch between two separate truss rods. Sometimes when I'm thinking, I do a first pass almost, thinking only about getting the frets level, or getting down any high frets, or bottoming out any low frets, and I'll use the thin and more flexible truss rod to do that, the narrow, I should say, flexible truss rod. And then once I've got rid of any obvious fret buzz of uneven frets and leveled out, bottomed out low frets, then I will go back over it if I've still got fret slap, and I will use this Stuart truss rod, which is stiffer and wider, and I will use that to gently impose the smooth curve onto the less than perfect curve of the under compression neck. So hopefully we've done this, what we'll hear is an improvement in the fret slap. Yep. That is how tiny an amount it is. Just that much work to get rid of that fret slap. And fret slap is my distinction. Well, it doesn't really matter what you call it. I just have two names for it so that I can distinguish them from each other. Fret buzz is what I call when you have a single high fret or a single low fret in a particular place and it's causing a note to choke out or the bends to choke out in a patch there. Fret slap is caused not by a single high fret. It is a symptom of the strings not having enough room to rotate and flap about while you're playing them, and I've found that's caused mainly by that sort of bumpy topography of the neck under load. And I suppose you know it is you could say it's some uneven frets, but what you find is it tends to be little clusters of uneven frets. So we're not thinking about individual frets, we're thinking about little wobbles along the whole length of the board. So what we'll probably now find, we should find, is that these okay, a little bit more still there in this area, up to here, and we'll just double check the action again. This is still a fraction low, so let's just get it to where it should be exactly before we commit to any more leveling. All around the 12th fret. Okay, so I'm going to go back with my beam and I'm going to attempt to ease out this area here. So we go back into here with our ready calibrated truss rod, and I'm going to just really concentrate on maybe a little bit of pressure here now, just to kind of imagine this is a little cluster of rocks on the seabed, and I just want to even them out. Just take the tops off them a little bit so they don't stick up further than everything else. So it's a little cluster around the 12th, either side of the 12th fret. Let's have a listen. Let's have a listen through the round window. Tiny little bit. You see how nearly that's gone? And you can hear it with your own ears. That's the beauty of this system. And if you ain't convinced now, you never will be. But that's when I figured out the second part of the miracle of the old banana is when I really started to rediscovered my faith in it, actually. And that will be spot on. Now at the moment it looks filthy, right? It's a mess of dust and stuff. Hit it really hard, you can make it do it. Let's just check the flatness. Yeah, we are quite flat too. We want 1.5 mils, that's the target action. We are barely on 1.5, if that. It's quite hard to kind of settle on where it is. That's good. Getting lower, getting lower, getting lower. That's barely above 1, that's B string there. Okay. I'm going to do a tiny bit more on the E, lower E, but I'm going to recalibrate to make sure I've got the right curve. See, this is the really important bit, the recalibrating bit. So I've done a few rounds and I'm going to just double check that the tuning of this hasn't moved and we've still got the right shape. I think that's kind of pretty good. If anything, a tiny bit over curved, so I'm just going to, you can't believe how lightly a touch that is, but that's going to be my last calibration for this. And I'm going to kind of just hold it in the middle. Now I'm sort of looking all the time at making sure that what it's doing down at this end, and making sure that it's not leaving any huge chunks of string wear, wear grooves. Like I said, I don't really want to go after them for their own sake, but I'm doing quite a bit of leveling to get this right, so I do have the leeway to go and take care of those, but I think this is pretty much it. That's good. I'm happy with that. So we got a load of mess on my hands. What can you see? Oh yeah, I got a long view here. So I'm done with the strings for now. So undo these. I think the actually the nut can stay where it is. I don't think I need to glue it in at all. Just as the previous one wasn't glued in, I think we've got the width of it just right, so it stays in under a little bit of pressure. Much better that we don't put glue on it, so we don't cause problems if anyone wants to change it in the future. It's always one of those things, if you don't have to glue it, don't. You know, and in many ways, thankfully, the previous person at the factory didn't fit the previous one with glue. They relied on the snugness of the fit, which is good to know. Okay, so we got a bunch of strings that I'm going to snip off and throw away. So the next bit, in a way, the precision bit's done for the setup. What I mean by that is that we've done the leveling for the target action that I've chosen. When I come to restring it, put new strings on, we're going to end up with the strings floating, or the tremolo floating. So before I start setting the float, I make sure that the action I set is actually down below, a 0.5 millimeter below where I want to end up, because point being is the act of raising the tremolo into a fully floating mode lifts the playing action up by 0.5 millimeter for a standard low setting action that I use. So I can predict how much it will go up, so I can start with it under height, and then and I know that when I've dialed in the range of upward tremolo movement, I know that it's going to end up where I want it, overall action. Okay, so now the next bit, we're still in a decent view here. Yes, sort of a bit zoomed out, but it's okay. Next bit here is I'm going to need to take all of these out. So here we go. I'm going to. Now some people will probably enjoy doing pickup change here with the guitar right there. I would prefer myself to remove this plate altogether and bring it over to the bench and refit it when I'm done. Do the soldering over there. It's a separate undertaking. This screw driver bit is just slightly the wrong size. And this one's just slightly too big, so that's not very helpful, America. America! You'll want to jump a little bit. Okay. Now, an interesting one, we've got Stuart's Chris Shiflett Telecaster to do some work on tomorrow, and that one, he says, has more hum than this one, and this is single coils, and that one's both 2 humbuckers, so kind of interested to know why the Chris Shiflett Telly is so noisy. Thanks, man. Okay, does this actually make it easy to come out? Oh, look at this. We actually have to take we nearly have to take the neck off to get that back on. Not ideal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the oh, that's fantastic, look at that, that's split the wood. Their grounding thingy has actually split the wood. I'm going to cut off the, what do you call it, contacts here. And, oops, sorry. And we'll go around the other side and we'll cut off the claw. The grounding claw for the tremolo. Thank you. Right, so let's have a quick look in here while we're at it, see what we have in a Fender crack where they put that screw in. Obviously, pilot hole too small for that screw. It's going through, presumably, into the conductive paint that they must have in there. Is this actually in? These things don't seem to want to focus. So we replaced the bridge, didn't we, with the Wilkinson, yeah, with the pushing arm with these saddles. That's cool. Look at that for a funny route. It's not the end of the world, doesn't matter, it's hidden, but it always makes me kind of smile. Like somebody's template's quite something E. Okay, so that's all ready to solder, and we're going to do a replacement. Let me just zoom back out, or stand it up there. Also, what we've got to do, is that going to move? You know, it might just. What I might do is I might put a tiny bit of glue. I'd prefer not to, but if what you don't want is it to creak sideways when somebody's bending a note, because that's no good either. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the inside edge of there, and then push it in. Have to kind of get it lined up straight away. No chance for movements. Put it down and we're there. Okay. So next two things to do then. Well, first thing to do is we'll recrown the frets, which is an important part of everything. So again, back to the black marker pen. I'm going to use the Stuart Recrowning file, or to reprofile the frets. And basically that means turning them from slightly flattened things into things that look like arches, again, the way they should look. And that, the benefit of that is it puts the intonation point back onto the top of the fret instead of moving it slightly forwards, which is what happens if you leave it as a flat. You leave it as a flattened fret. So as I use this file, I'm using it, and it takes off the sort of shoulders, as I call it, of the frets where I've done some leveling, so it kind of cuts the frets inwards a little bit, rounding off the shoulders, and brings kind of leaves, ends up, my aim is to leave a black line of marker pen untouched in this, running right down the center of the fret. When I've done that, I know that I've used this concave file to reshape the fret properly. Now the ones that we've done lots of leveling on will take longer to recrown, and the ones that we hardly touched because they were low in the first place, they tend to be very quick. So once I've done this, I will then mask off the frets ready for the polishing and sanding and polishing process as we kind of get them polished back out to a nice shiny finish. A little bit of wear up here too, which I can see. It'll disappear in the polishing process, but I can still see there's a couple of tiny grooves there. Like I said before, I'm not prepared to trade fret metal. Also, I know that there's a point at which if I stop, the sanding process will actually take away the last little bits of, the last little bumps of fret wear. So it's a kind of game of knowing just what point you can stop leveling and confident that the sanding process will remove the last little bit. Okay, so we're kind of getting there. Just have to try and think what I'll get through tonight, because I've got a lot on this weekend. I have to sort of pace things. In next week, I've got Tuesday and Wednesday earmarked for better humidity. So I'm hoping to get Adam's SG, this carved, interestingly belly carved, forearm sloped SG hybrid beast I'm making for him. Got to get the shapes, carves and everything done on that, because I need to start painting it on Tuesday and Wednesday. Because the problem I've got is I don't know when I'm going to get good weather again after that. So that's a difficulty of still, although I've got a great, much improved space to do spraying compared to trying to do it from home and upsetting the neighbours. It still is nowhere near a satisfactory environment for it, in that I can't really control the humidity very well, or the temperature in that other space. I can do it a little bit better in here, but then I can't work on anything else, and I also cover all my builds and spare parts in dust, which isn't ideal. I mean, it doesn't damage it, it always comes off, but it just I could do without covering everything in a layer of dust. So my plan, I think, is I'm going to sort of think ahead into the winter and across into the next year, and my plan will be to I think, pretty certain, to build a smallish enclosed cabinet in the other room. Now, kind of originally I was hoping that I could use the room itself, but when I started exploring it a bit, I discovered that it had it's got no roofs to speak of. I mean, it's got a excuse me, a hardboard roof, which I was going to put insulation up there and try and make it work, but the walls are very thin and got holes and gaps in them. They haven't got insulation. The roof is thin hardboard, and if I even put some of the insulation on it, it would just buckle and fall through. It's hard. It would be very difficult to rebuild that from above. I'd be having to rebuild the roof of the entire room, which I could do, but I would then have to move 1 million tons of old fluorescent light bulbs that Roger's got up there. So it's a big deal. So I'm kind of thinking it would probably be simpler for me to build a booth inside, but build it with a view to controlling the environment in just the booth itself. Now, I'm not I don't have a lot of experience of exactly what's needed to do that, so I'm going to have to do some kind of research and ask around and stuff, but I think it will be a better thing. You know, the biggest barrier, there are kind of different levels of obstacles really. When you don't have space to do spraying in, the biggest obstacle of all, funnily enough, is wind. Because when you spray outside, I mean, before you even take into account humidity, your first biggest obstacle is wind. So you might pay £18 for a can of nitro, but if you do it outside in your back garden, 60% of that will blow away. It won't even go anywhere near the piece, which is an incredibly wasteful and expensive and environmentally unsound way of doing things. So you know, the biggest improvement you can make, because you're still outdoors, of course, you've still got the same weather problems, humidity and so on, but outdoor is just a total waste of paint. End of story. So the first thing you have to do is get indoors in some sort of sheltered arrangement, and then your problem. I mean, when you first spray inside after spraying outdoors, and you find how much more paint you get out of a tin, you can't believe it. It's like a revelation. So then your challenge, it becomes environment, humidity and temperature, and I've found over the first few months in this place, or certainly in the beginning of 2021, when I started doing some spraying in the corner of my little storeroom in there, because I had nowhere else, I had to do it in there. I got a heater in there, I got a dehumidifier, and together those things actually brought the conditions into sort of low 60s, mid to low 60s, and actually I was able to get a couple of urgent jobs done, even though it wasn't ideal. And of course the problem then, as I said, is getting everything covered in sort of overspray dust, and it's okay, but then if I have to come in and continue working here, well, actually what I found myself doing was saving up the spray jobs to the last hour of the day, and then I would spray, and then I would basically walk around in here with the mask on, tidying up, doing things, and then half an hour later do another bit of spray, walk around in here for another half an hour with the mask on, tidying things up, preparing for the next day, and get a couple of coats done, and then clear out and go home, and get into the car with the mask on most of the time, and then by the time I came back the next day it would dissipated and cleared up. So it was doable, but lots of dust and overspray, as I mentioned before. So I'm confident that a small area with some insulation of certain kinds and with a dehumidifier in there, a smaller area can be productive. And for me, building one in the other room means if I can set the thing running, warm it up, dehumidify it for a bit until I get down to a workable amount, then I can do a coat, shut the door, come in here, continue with setups, go back out in a half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, and do another coat, and so on and so on. So it's a much better arrangement all round. So what I'm just going to do is place that there, finish off putting the tape on here, and then what I'm going to do is stop for a cup of tea. I think it would probably make sense that while I'm off camera I will sand and polish out the frets. I might as well get that bit done, and then I will be only, in inverted commas, left to really do the mostly harder bit, doing the wiring in. Now what I don't know at the moment is whether the Fender pickups are going to be in phase with the Seymour Duncan. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of checking to find out. And funnily enough, I'd never actually researched how I was to check that. And I found a little online article saying, well, what you do is you hook up the pickups to a meter, and then you put a screwdriver across the pickup that you've got the meter attached to, and you quickly pull away the screwdriver metal shaft of the screwdriver, and it says the voltage, the resistance will peak one way, either up or down, and just make a note of whether it's up or down. And then what you'll find is your pickup, if your new pickup spikes the same way when you remove the screwdriver, then it will be in phase, and if it spikes the opposite way, it'll be out of phase with the pickup you just checked. So all I really need to do in this guitar is make sure that the bridge and the middle are in phase. Now that's got nothing to do with the reverse wound business. For if it was, for this guitar here with its 3 single coils originally, the middle one is probably reverse wound, almost certainly reverse wound, but it might, it won't be out of phase. It's a different thing. So okay, so that's the end of those little ones. I need to go to the smaller ones now. Yeah, so I think I might have a cup of tea, a stop. I think I'll be going home late tonight, because on top of this I have also got an old vintage quirky parts caster, Telecaster, to take apart. I'm not going to do much to it tonight, but I wanted to strip it down into its bits and defret it, because it's getting a refret. So I just wanted to do that bit on camera today. So I would be happy to have made some progress with this one, and I've done quite a bit of work on Adam's SG by identifying where the bridge goes, identifying the angle for the neck route, by drawing up and marking out the belly route, belly carve, and the forearm slope, and so on and so forth. So I've done quite a lot on that. Oh, and I've designed and extended and drawn out the unusual scratch plate as well. So yeah, I think I've done quite a bit. And in a way, that one has to get done before Tuesday, or it has to be the carving parts and the routes, including the pickup routes, of course, all have to be done by Tuesday, so I can get this. I take advantage of this low humidity bit that's coming in, we hope. And of course, what I'd also like to be able to do is get in the sunshine and lie in the hammock and take a break, a non-existent summer. But that sounds like a typical British whinge, and I wouldn't be the person to do that, as you know. Never whinging. Tomorrow I was planning to do, what am I doing? No, tomorrow, sorry, I was planning to do John's Strat, which is a USA, I think it's a USA one. So that's another Strat, and it might be that I finish do John's and finish this one completely off tomorrow. Okay, so I think it makes sense if I go off camera for a bit. Sand out. Next time you'll see me is over there ready to solder. So I'll see you shortly. Good afternoon. It really is afternoon. What time is it? 1 second. 2:13. And look at that. I'm indoors on a sunny day. That's business for you. I know. I'm so bitter. Anyway, look. I have today. What have I done today? Oh yeah, today I have just rewired Stuart's guitar here, because turns out he wanted a push switch. So now we have a push to operate a coil split. So what I'm going to do now, I didn't video that because I just wanted a bit of time charging the old, what do I call it? Charging the old batteries. And oh heck, that's just right. I'm just going to put that there for a minute. Long view while I get the strings done. What's that going overhead? Some large military thing probably on its way to Kabul or somewhere. Oh, what a situation. Just forgive me while I get the strings through. So what I'm going to do today is just going to finish this one off with by stringing it, stretching the strings, and then setting the tremolo in floaty mode. So I'll be using the Galeazzo method, augmented with my extra little bit of whatchamacallit, something or other, a little tweak from the Reloved guitars brain. Anyway, that's, you know, it's an observation about the method that I learned to set the range of tremolo float, which Galeazzo kind of instigated, came up with, invented, innovated. Anyway, it was a really good way of doing it, but after a while I kind of worked out that there was a little tiny aspect missing, and that was that when you raise a tremolo into the float position, the action goes up around about 0.5 millimeter. So what I found was if you set all your things up and then and then found yourself, you set your action and everything, got it how you wanted, then set the tremolo, what you'd find was that the tremolo action would go up. And if you then try to adjust the action while your bridge was floating, it was impossible to do. And what happened was that the more you adjusted it, the further down the more you'd reduce the load on the strings, and the more the tremolo would change its position. So actually it turned out to be a bit of a wild goose chase, because you'd eventually end up completely defeating the whole object. So there's a small oversight on his part, I think, and maybe because he's not the kind of, maybe a sort of kind of guy who would have as low actions as I have, because maybe you wouldn't notice it so much if you had a standard high action, possibly, I don't know. But anyway, so my advice on doing these trem setups, or the floating trems, is to set everything up with your ideal low, your target low playing action, with your, as it currently is, with the plate decked on the floor, on the top of the guitar I should say, and then you dial it down 0.5 millimeter prior to starting the tremolo set, and then tune it up. Now at that point you may find that it won't play properly, i.e. you'll get buzzes and whatever, but that's okay, because you're not really playing it, you're just putting it there to start the tremolo setting process. So you start the tremolo set, and then lo and behold, by the time you get to the correct amount of float, your action is back up at the start point. Now, just a little thing here I'm doing with these locking tuners. It's a fact that the locking part crimps the string. So what I do is I pull all the way through, and I pull back, if you like, a thumbnail or fingernail's worth. Then I tighten it up. Then I cut off the wire. Now this gives me about half a loop, or maybe a maximum of a loop of wire to go around the post. And you might say, but that defeats the whole object. Well, it might do, but I have said before, this will give you the opportunity to slack and retighten the strings once. Right? Now you never know what that might be needed to be for. Perhaps a bit less likely on a Strat style guitar, but certainly the number of times you'll find yourself needing to slack off and tighten up on a Les Paul style guitar, this business of putting this little bit of extra wire on will be invaluable. Now, yes, it puts a loop round, okay? Now, I can tell you from playing and stretching out strings and whatever, that you can stretch, it's a very small amount of string on the post. Nothing to worry about, okay? I would rather give Stuart the one opportunity to slack these off and, if necessary, retighten them. Now what will happen is, if you have to slack these strings off, right off for any particular reason, then what I would recommend is that you, before you tighten them up, you undo the locking part and push the string right the way through one time, and then you'll have a fresh piece of string going through and it won't be on the previously crimped piece. That's the important bit that you have to watch out for. So. Okay, so these are tightened up the first time. Now I'm just going to stretch out the strings. First stretch, and then we'll just tune up again. Now this is that's interesting. It's actually lower now than it was before. What's happened there? Isn't that lucky I didn't glue that in? Let's just check the end action here if this is too low. I shouldn't have moved. I don't think I've moved the action this end, but I may have done. That's curious. Right, now I'm going to need to undo this because I've got to get this nut and give it a tiny lift. That's really weird. I don't know if that's pushed out, bedded it in a tiny bit more. So here's a first undoing. Now I could probably get away with tightening that up one more time. So let's have a look. Okay, let's get my thingamy pliers. So what I'll need to do with this is I'll need to just lift the thank you. This has sat down a tiny fraction deeper than it did. So what I want to do is on the base side I'm going to put a tiny bit of tin foil, only a small amount, but this will lift it up. That's the thing about not having an adjustable one. I could render this adjustable now, but let's see if I can lift it up with this first. Otherwise we'll go to adjustable. Was I? Problem is I'd have to take it down a little bit further. That's interesting. Well, let's do a little bit of lift on the bass side, and it's only a tiny amount, so let's have a look. So this is a kind of tin foil paper job, a bit fiddly, as you can see. And really all I want to do is put it on the bass side. See, it sticks to everything, it's hopeless. Get rid of the crumpled up bit. So of course it's always difficult to handle anything on a curve, so that's how we have to handle it. Off you go, and then it sticks to everything you don't want it to stick to. So this is basically all I'm doing now is I'm just lifting up the bass side by a very small amount. The treble side seems fine, but it seems to, the bass seems to have just pulled in, and that's one of the problems with a nut. That's if you're I don't know, 1/100th of a millimetre off from the thickness, which is really difficult to get precisely, then it can sit. One time you tighten the strings up, it can sit in one place, and then it can sit a fraction of a millimetre lower the next time, if it so wishes. And that's just the way it is, I'm afraid. Yeah. Hard to handle. I can't handle it. Bits get stuck everywhere like there. Anyway, so in the other room I am currently doing some spraying. I can't get rid of this stuff, it gets everywhere. Very useful, but bloody annoying. And what we don't want is it to stick up and thicken up this face of this nut. We don't want any more problems with it getting stuck in the slot. So I'm going to make sure in each case that we're sort of trimmed, scraped or trimmed inwards. Just need it lifting a little bit, but not constricting the nut anyway. So I'm going to put another little bit on there. It's the kind of stuff that you're doing on your own in a workshop and you're not talking to anybody. It's much easier. You just zone out, really, I suppose. But holding this in place is nigh on impossible. But it is, I mean, the good thing about using a little bit of foil like this is, as I say, it can make incredibly tiny height adjustments or thickness adjustments, whatever it requires to lift up. So what I'm doing is I'm just building up a little bit of a lift on the left side, just to make sure, and I'm sort of, what's the word, grading it, feathering it, you might say, if it was a haircut, so that it's a progressive, gradual increase. But honestly, it's really hard to handle. It's so annoying. And what you can do is you can add a few bits together, like that. There you go. Oh my god, I'm hopeless. And again, tidy up the edge. So this is just a very fine tuning. I can see there's a little dent there where there's a kind of dent in the nut. Don't know what it was for, but okay. So as you can tell, this is a lot of guesswork, really. But it's these layers of tape are so tiny, the amount it lifts up is very, very small. I ran out of words. I was going to say minuscule, used it before. Infinitesimally small, used it before. Microscopic, used it before. Little. Anyway, this, I was hoping this would just hurry up and be finished now, this guitar, because I'm at that sort of point really where I've been working on it a while. This is interesting. That's a little bump, courtesy of the little dent in the bottom of the nut. Right, well, so I'm here early today, partly for take advantage of the humidity, low humidity, which I have to say has completely surprised me, because I went out and did my first coat and it clouded, bloomed, yeah, I suppose it was, straight away, which is ridiculous, because it's only, according to this, it's 60%, and according to the Met Office it's supposed to be even lower than that, but I have no idea who to believe anymore. But my machine says it's at 60, which should be a comfortable amount, but as with all things, it's deciding not to play. So I've got, oh great, this is squidging and moving. Yeah, it's decided not to play, so I've got a little bit of bloom on the paintwork, so it's a bit less. The second coat is a bit less than the first one, so that's better. So I just have to make sure that it goes on, the next coat goes on without any. I think what happens is, if there is a tiny bit of moisture in, it tends to help the moisture release each coat you put on. So I'm putting on very light coats at the moment until the, as I see it, until the humidity improves. But it should be pretty good at this moment in time. Okay, so that's good. That's lifted those back on that side. Okay, so I'm going to give it a little pull, get everything bedded back in. Now at this point, if the crimped part of the string wants to let loose and break off, it'll do it right now, but thankfully it isn't. Now I'm going to look carefully at this, and if I'm not happy with how it is, I tell you now, I will, if I'm not happy, I will revert to, I will make adjustable, but to begin with, I'll leave as is, as is. That's pretty good. It's nicely fitted as well, and doesn't need glue. Okay, let's go. Where are we? We are in the long view. Long view! Okay, so now it's time to finally get back to where we should be, which is I'm going to do some stretching, check the intonation. I'm going to replace the arm for the time being. Okay, so this is currently dialed right in, so it's tightened up, and the tremolo plate is on the deck. But we're going to raise it up into a float, and the old question is, how much float do we need? Well, first of all, I want to stretch out the strings. That's really important. So this is how I go about it. Just thumb and forefinger. Thumb and forefinger, pushing and stretching. And we need to do this every time you put new strings on until there's no more detuning. Even with the tremolo floating, you still need to do this, because tremolo will show up where the slack has not been released. Okay, so a couple more pulls. Make sure everything's bedded down. Good, good, good. Alrighty. So now what we're going to do is the favoured method. So let's bring you down here for a view from this end. How good it looks from here, but okay. Well, we're zoomed out, but it's a better way of getting more in the picture. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to need the oh hellfire. I've done something really stupid. I've tried to get the guitar lead out over a drill, bendy drill. So now I'm tangled up. God, you dopey bloke, you. Right, be there soon, eventually. So, God, there's so many wires around, it's just silly. Anyway, nearly done. Hooray! Finally. So, plug in. So this method of setting the float of the tremolo, its purpose, it always makes a lot of things make things sound more complex than they are. The purpose of this method here I'm going to show is only so that you can end up with a fixed and predictable amount of bend available when you bend backwards. So obviously if you have the thing pushing right the way forward, you'll get more bend when you bend it back flat to the deck. If it's only a tiny bit lifted, you'll have hardly any bend when you bend it back to the deck and it returns to this low position. So this is only really about setting it in a way to set it so that you can predict and control the amount of bend you set. And it's a very simple procedure, which is elegant, I think. So what we do is, remember I said to you that I need the American one. Remember I said that the process of floating to the correct amount of float that we want costs us or raises the action by half a millimeter. So this is the action I leveled to earlier on the other day. So what I do is I start by, oh no, these are replacement ones, so it's not the US ones. I start by I'm going to mark up my little screwdriver thing. Now this always looks like, I don't know, people, maybe it's my mind, I think it looks like something else. Right. So what I do is I start out with adjusting these down so that's counterclockwise by 1/2 turn. So I literally, that's why I mark the end of this. So I do 1/2 turn for every single one of these grub screws, like that. Half turn, 180, okay? So whatever it's set to now, each one is going 1/2 turn lower. And that happens to be 0.5 of a millimeter. Now, this is very useful because in a minute when we do the setting of the float, I can predict, and the reason I know this is because I've measured it and done it several times, loads of times, and by trial and error worked out what the change is. And for a typical setup like we would go for, it tends to be 1/2 a millimeter. So now I'm 1/2 a millimeter down. I expect to hear buzzes, but that's not a point. That's not an important point right now. So the first thing I do is I turn on my tuner, which I don't know if you can see at all, and I turn up my volume and tone, and I just want to tune. Now of course it's gone flat because I've wound the grub screws down or lowered the saddles. Now I'm retuned. Now what I do, see this is what's got me before. I've been here in the daytime, and this big rumbling, there's a big rumbling sound that comes from one of the machines here, or lorries or something. It starts to make me feel ill, like I'm in a motorway car going along the motorway. So what we do is we take the G string, for example, and we bend it down until it becomes an E. Alright, and what we do is we put in some post-it notes underneath the tremolo block. There you go. So we've gone from G down to E. Okay, now what we do, and we've got the paper underneath the block, so now what we do, we tune this back up to G. Remember, as at the beginning, remember I tightened in the claw screws. So we tighten everything, tune everything back up to pitch. Yeah, the claw screws have to be in, which I started out with. That was my start point before I did the setup. So I know they're in. But if you're going to do this without doing the setup, you need to start with the claw screws all the way in to hold the plate flat on the deck. Right, so this is now tuned to pitch, and if I now take out the paper holding the block up, it now falls backwards under the spring power and everything's sharp. F. So what I do, and this is the miracle bit, you hold the guitar up, you keep looking for the G string. We want that to go from where it is now to an A, from an A down to the G, and to do that we only unscrew the claw screws at the back, and you'll see the note going down, and basically we just keep going down until we're back on a G. So we're on an A still, and what happens is as we slack off the tremolo claw screws, the note comes down closer to where the original G it should be, but also the tail end, as it comes down, the tail end of the tremolo plate, bridge plate, will lift up. As it lifts up, you'll see it start to float. See G flat now, so down, a semitone now, still to go. And if you go too far, you can always come back and tighten it up again. Still sharp of G, and now we've got some space now as the back of the bridge plate is kicked up. And then when we get to the G, that's almost there. I mean, the tiniest little movement on one of these will do it. Okay, cool, it might even be too much. There we go, that's on G. So now what you can see, I hope you can see, if I can use the mirror. Let's try and zoom you. I'm sorry, this is so awful not being able to see. Somewhere like that. Where are you? Oh yeah, there you are. See that little bit of float there? That's your range of movement upwards, and it should be, if we start with an E, it goes from E to F. It's fractionally short of F, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a little bit more float room. Tune everything up. So the procedure with the post-it notes is only to get to a predictable range of upwards movement. Stop playing A, E, F. There you go. So that's our floating tremolo range. So I got very close with the let me just check one thing. I got very close with the post-it notes, and then I made a very slight adjustment afterwards, as you saw, just to make sure it had the range I wanted. And what we should have, when we check the actions, we should have 1.5 and 1.2, which is exactly where we wanted to be. So let's just check the intonation. That looks a tiny bit sharp, so we're going to bring that back with the right screwdriver. Okay, that's good. Now it means I've got to bring back the others a little bit, so I'm going to slack off the B and haul this back a little bit and then tune it. Good. That's all in the right sort of order. Now let's check the D. It's the only other one that's likely to be out. Yeah, a little bit sharp. So let's drag that back. I think all these need to come back a little bit. So a little bit of quick adjustment. Let's go by the tuner. Tiny bit further back. Yep. Short. Pull this one back a bit further. Now I'm going to also pull the A back, and I'm also going to pull back the D a little bit. I think I'm going to need to get seasickness pills for in here. There we go. Whew, finally get there. Alright, thank you for watching. That was the Stratocaster. Oh, push-pull. Let's just check that one thing. Let's put that into... I did it, checked it before without the strings on, but let's check it one more time. One more time. And then we'll make sure that the single coil humbucker, single coil humbucker. There we go, coil split all working. That's it. Alright, well, see you in a minute for the next one, Telecaster.